Our group was, oh, of course, did I, oh, yes, absolutely. That is a, yes, exactly. Female women, thank you. Women in Conversation was co-founded in 2011 by Kaya Oakes and our own Jean Molesky Pose, and to offer opportunities to consider theology, scripture, and spirituality from women's perspectives, to deepen our prayer and discernment practices, and to support one another. I'll briefly review our schedule. We have our opening introductions, a brief mention of our annual theme, and then we will have a 45-minute dialogue between Jean and our speaker, Mary Jo McConahay. We will then have a 15-minute break at 10:30. That's the magic number. If for some reason, I want to mention restrooms. There is a restroom on the upstairs level. If you go straight through the multi-use room and to your right, the other women's restroom is downstairs around the corner, kind of in the back beneath us. So if you do need to use the restroom, that's their locations. And then we'll have 20 minutes after the break, we'll have 20 minutes of sharing between members in dyads, followed by a 25-minute large group discussion. And we intend to then announcements. There will be books for sale, which are in the back during the break and at the end of the session. And thank you to Mrs. Dalloways for being here and supporting us this morning. Very much appreciate it. And then we target our closure around 10 minutes to 12, and then we open it up for socializing. So the presentation will be recorded, but not the small and the large group discussions. So we maintain confidentiality with all discussions. Okay. So Jane Claire.
Yes.
Available. I think I forgot to welcome all of our many, many Zoom attendees this morning. I believe Karen will spotlight Mary Jane Claire. Very good. Good morning.
Good morning. Okay, can everyone hear me? Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, one can. Okay, my name is Jane Claire. Greetings from Wisconsin. Betty Wharton and I were invited to lead prayer for our gathering today. So now let us take a few moments in silence to open our minds and hearts to welcome the gifts of this gathering. Let us pray. Creator of all, make us women of your peace and justice. Where there is oppression, let us bring equality. Where there is abuse, dignity. Where there is fragmentation, unity. Where there is conflict, let us bring resolution. Where there is discrimination, mutuality. And where there is violence, vision. Where there is powerlessness, let us bring strength. O loving Spirit of God, grant that we may not so much seek to compete as to collaborate, to exclude as to include, dominate as to complement. For it is in healing that we are healed. It is in reconciling that we are reconciled. It is in our common bond that we become whole. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Jane Claire. She and I are friends of over 55 years. I want to a moment here to tell you that our theme for this particular year has been encountering the other, midwives for change. And the theme has allowed us to bring in, we've brought in, for example, Ann Simmons Booker in Oakland from the Catholic Worker, and she has the Canticle Farm. So encountering, in that case, with the other has to do with the earth and people within the city of Oakland. And we have had Allison Benders also came in. She talked about America's original sin, from race to grace. We had a woman come in and speak on ancestry and the combination of different roots and moving forward for justice. And today, I can't think of kind of a more appropriate midwife, you know, also as Mary Jo. The origin of the idea of encountering the other came from Frate Tulli, Pope Francis's encyclical, where he recognized the polarity that's going on in our world and our church. And he said, you know, what we really need to do is encounter the other. And that is why we've chosen today, Mary Jo, to be with us, because encountering the other, and in this sense, certainly in the church, but encountering another sense of church. I want to introduce very briefly in the NCR, if you haven't read the article yet, she is one of the most prominent Catholic journalists in America. There was a wonderful review of her book yesterday in the NCR. Oh, hold the mic. Yes, okay, thank you. And very briefly, Mary Jo has been a respondent in Central America for 15 years during the war. And in the last 12 years has published 3 books. She's also a documentary filmmaker, and her books have won a number of awards. I certainly recommend, I don't want to take a lot of time. She and I agreed to introduce her. It would take quite a while. She didn't say that, I did. But you can certainly find on the book cover here background information on Mary Jo. I want to say one thing which those of you who are Berkeleyites, I think, might enjoy. Who is this book dedicated to? To the memory of Bill O'Donnell, social justice activist, a Bishopsmere parish priest. So just very briefly, Mary Jo book, Playing God, 9 chapters, each chapter whole in itself. And I think the wonderful thing about this is it threads together so many different aspects that are going on in our world and our church. Tom Roberts, former editor of the NCR, says this is a very important book. It's valuable in its detailed research. She connects the dots in the history trail. She's done a great service by laying out the case. So I want you to welcome Mary Jo. We're going to be in conversation, and I think it'll be fun. We've worked together for a few years. Okay. Okay. Thank you. So, Mary Jo, this is a very special group of women that are here. I believe women that we've shared many legacies together, share a love for the church, share a sense of loss, share a sense of hope. But we are here. We're here because we really believe and understand that we need to know the fullness, I sense, you know, of what's going on in the church. And Your work is very brave. I find it very prophetic and meticulous research. 44 pages of single space footnotes at the end, references at the end. So you've covered the war in Central America. You're an active Catholic member in San Francisco. Wanted to be an altar girl. But I want to, I want to know what motivated you to write this book. What motivated you to write this book? It is fearless.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you, Ellen, and all those who make this possible. And thank you to everybody out there in the ether. I'm thrilled to be here. I love this group. What motivated me to write Playing God? January 6th, 2021. Many of us watched on television, probably in horror, as I did, or at least I can speak for myself. I watched in horror as the president spoke and as people, his followers, gathered outside the Capitol. Jean mentioned that I had covered Latin America as a journalist, and I've been in coups before. And I said to myself, this is a coup. This is a coup. In fact, it was an unsuccessful coup. But what really shook me was to see the camera shots of people, many of whom were supporting violent moves that day, with crucifixes, with pictures of Jesus in a MAGA hat, supporting a particular political wing of the Republican Party, and a lot of talk in those interviewed about a Christian nation. And I said to myself, wait, this is just wrong, and you can't take this away from me. This, Christianity is something to me that it is not to these folks. And I happen to have been working on a fellowship, very wonderful journalists fellowship that I was very grateful to get on the future of the Catholic Church. And I was already skeptical, shall we say, of some corners of my own church. And I said to myself, where do we come in on this? And the rest is several months, because the publisher wanted it fast rather than 5 years like my last book took, of writing and work and producing Playing God.
Thank you. Your book of 9 stunning chapters opens with the pandemic. And you recall for us Pope Francis walking up the Vatican in a cold, gray evening, alone, walking up and announcing and praying for people in the world because of COVID, the pandemic. You juxtapose that with Archbishop Cordileone and other bishops in the United States who were COVID vaccine deniers. Why did you begin there? And what came clear to you in writing that particular chapter, which I think leads to the question, what is Christian nationalism?
I was so moved and impressed by Pope Francis walking virtually alone. He needed a little help there with some stairs, but virtually alone in that St. Peter's Square, in the rain, in pain, and giving one of the most beautiful
sermons, I don't know what you call it, that I've ever heard, which was about the apostles in the boat losing faith in the storm, and the Pope saying, this is the time where we must not be afraid. We must all pull together to weather the storm. And not so long after that, I attended a Save the Mass rally and demonstration of Archbishop Cordileone in San Francisco. And the tones, the message could not have been more different. Archbishop Cordileone is my own archbishop, but he's not by himself in his rejection of government authority, and his as I show in the chapter, he, for instance, was not vaccinated even as he was distributing Holy Communion and distributing breakfast to the poor, and well, actually was spreading lies about COVID and vaccination. But most importantly, his message was, we are being attacked by the elites of this country. We, meaning Catholics. It's a trope of Christian nationalism to be aggrieved, to feel that, I feel like I'm echoing. Is this all right? Wait, okay. To feel that we are victims and that we have to band together to fight authority. In this case, the authority was trying to help people survive by encouraging vaccination and other measures. That bridge to nationalism, to Christian nationalism, maybe I ought to define Christian nationalism, because it's being bandied about quite a bit. Sometimes I have to clip things because I can't read them right away. And this was a few days ago in the New York Times. In the New York Times, it said Christian nationalism will dominate in 2024, meaning the elections for president in 2024. Christian nationalism is not religion. Is not religion. It's a political ideology. It's based on the belief, I want to get this exactly right, that God intended ours to be a Christian nation. Now, what is Christian? That gets defined by the people that say we ought to be a Christian nation. It boils down to a belief that there ought not to be a separation between church and state. That Christian values are enough for everybody. The values of the founders. Now, we could go into how Christian were the values of the founders who owned slaves, many of them, who did not permit any women to be involved in the quote unquote founding, the writing of the Constitution. But be that as it may, Christian nationalism is something that the most far right of the USCCB, the United States Catholic Conference of Bishops, stand for. And there's a lot of evidence for this that I lay out in the book. I get that.
Very briefly, why is that dangerous?
undermining elected authority can be dangerous. Mind you, that's not the same thing as criticizing elected authority or trying to change whatever it is that we're objecting to with elected authority. It's a threat to democracy because it has come to be identified with a particular wing of a particular party. And that, to me, is a threat to democracy. It's marked in the case of the bishops by what they have failed to do. Remember, in the examination of our consciences, it's not only what we have done to offend, but what we have failed to do. And since, for instance, I think the elections of 2020, there have been at least 400 voter suppression laws put forth by usually state legislatures, but also the National Congress inches toward that. These voter suppression laws are aimed at people of color, at quote unquote minority groups, and the bishops have not stood up against this. This to me is a threat to democracy. And it targets basic human rights, this Christian nationalism, such as autonomy over one's own body, yeah, that's why it's dangerous.
Thank you. It was interesting as I was reading a number of the all the chapters, but reading a couple of the chapters, I found California was actually, quote, an incubator environment for Catholic nonprofits. I mean, we have many, many nonprofits here in California. But again, in reading your truth telling, you put your finger on several events and institutes in California that have actually spawned the ultra-right Catholicism that reaches out from our state. I found this really important, born and raised, living in California. Why is it important for Californians, Catholic and non-Catholic, to understand what's going on in our own backyard?
Yeah, when Jean says she read every page, she's read every page multiple times because Jean and I and another woman writer for 15 years now have met every Friday, having shared our pages of whatever we're writing on Wednesday. And we, on Friday, come at each other, usually very, very gently, but sometimes very forcefully in our constructive criticism. So this book could not have been written without Jean's constructive criticism and that of our comadre, Rasa Gastitis. California, and it's not only California, but we're in California, most of us, except for some of you out there. And believe me, Michigan, Wisconsin, Florida are right up there with California in being hotbeds of Christian nationalism. But take the Napa Institute, which is an outgrowth of what do I call it? The tower. I can't remember what I call it in the book. I have to. What is it? Oh no, it's Our Lady of the Grapes, right? Because that is the name of the the chapel there. But that has its roots in Orange County with Bishop Van and Tim Bush, who is a billionaire real estate developer. And they, along with advisors, Archbishop Cordileone and Archbishop Gomez of Los Angeles, have created a crib, and it's cuna in Spanish. It's a breeding ground of apostolates, which are fairly right-wing, ultra-conservative, to the point that some of them have even, some of the individuals who have spoken at this, does everybody know what the Napa Institute is? It's a meeting of influential bishops, very wealthy Catholics, and laity, and they can hobnob together. They have, a lot of social events called in vino veritas, because they're all at Tim Bush's estate up there, where he also makes wine. And it's a very influential group. It's not to be dismissed because it has a big social element. Tim Bush, along with Charles Koch, who is a prime mover of very right-wing politics, not to mention right-wing legislation that comes out of a lot of the state legislatures, are business partners and co-funders of an important business school at Catholic University of America, the only pontifical university in the United States. And not to get off your California question, but one thing that really surprised me is the number of Catholic colleges supported by Charles Koch. And I give the background of his money, which came from during World War II. His father established the industries in Germany that made possible the first aircraft for Hitler, and before that, he worked for Stalin in the oil fields. And this is the money. Anyway, this is where the money comes from, and now it's going to Catholic colleges. California, with Koch and with another very important Catholic layman. Koch is not Catholic, but he's moneyed and makes important connections with Catholics. Koch and Tom Monahan, who is the founder of Domino's Pizza, have legal entities that they support, who in California brought a lawsuit that went to the Supreme Court, and bottom line, made it possible for mega donors to any cause they want to remain totally anonymous. This is called dark money, and it's a prime mover of Christian nationalist projects. So you've got the Napa Institute, you've got the California donor disclosure law that was turned over by the Supreme Court. And you have archbishops of two, I would say, very important locations in California, San Francisco and Los Angeles. Jose Gomez in Los Angeles is a member of Opus Dei, where many of the same elements, including patriarchy, of Christian nationalism are present. Oh, the Tower of Hope. The Tower of Hope is sort of a symbol to me of these kind of apostolates, which are growing one after another. And I hope it doesn't offend anyone, but one of them is on this campus called Focus, and it's on lots of campuses in the United States. And it has a very ultra-conservative point of view, takes a lot of its methodology from Opus Dei. And this is just one of the apostolates, which has a office or connections to the Tower of Hope, which is on the campus of the Christ Cathedral in Orange County. I would say Bishop Van is right there with Archbishop Gomez and Archbishop Corleone in being figureheads for the Christian nationalism in this state.
Thank you. I'm going to ask kind of a more personal question now, but I want to kind of the context of it. I found in reading the book and becoming kind of overwhelmed with like a fact, like Mother Angelica started a TV program years ago in a garage, and now it's part of a large mega media that relates to more than 22 million people are following this. Or the chapter on women, or the chapter on Black Catholics. I want to know, as a Catholic woman, how this affected your faith.
You know, I was just saying to somebody, was it Peg, before we started, that I forbade the publishers to put a crucifix on the front of this book, even though a crucifix is going to draw more eyes for sales, I think. I don't know, we've got a bookseller there, than a bishop's mitre. But I said, it's not about faith, it's about politics. And I'm not going to let 250 mostly white men, mostly past middle age, nothing wrong with being past middle age, but shall we say a lack of a diverse group take, you know, they're leaving me, I'm not leaving them. And my faith is what gets me through work like this. It's not damaged by it. It's assaulted by it. When you write a book, you learn things. Every book I've written has been a learning experience for me. It's not as if you go, at least in my case, you don't say, I know all this stuff, I'm going to write a book about it. No, it's not the way it is. It's more, I wonder about this, I'm going to write a book about it. And then you research, and learn about it. And some of the things I learned about, I was appalled at. But it's not something that attacked my faith. It made me want to, it sounds kind of pompous, but defend my faith more than lose it.
Thank you. I think that was a really important question and an important answer for me to hear in terms of the kind of crisis or what you help us understand here. One thing that was new for me in reading the book, I did not know the legacy of the relationship of Christian evangelicals and Catholics. And I find that is a really important piece for us to understand as believers.
Yeah, I wrote about this in the Los Angeles Times on Monday. what were the origins of Christian nationalism, and where did the Catholics come in on it? It's not that the Catholics came in on it. They were at the base of it in the 1970s and the 1980s. You know, we had a very prophetic group of bishops in the 1980s. They stood up against nuclear proliferation. They stood up against the way the country was going into neoliberalism. In fact, they wrote a very important economic letter reminding government of its obligation for the option for the poor. And they also stood against for instance, the incursions in Central America of Washington. I was covering Central America as a reporter at the time, and I met bishops who came down and said, you know, let's see what's going on here. They found out for themselves what was going on there before they mentioned, you know, before they made their policy decisions. Okay, I'm lost. I lost myself. It actually happens. The question was more about
the relationship between evangelicals.
Yeah, sorry, I got off on these great bishops of the 80s. But what you also had in the 80s was well, actually starting in the 70s, was the growth of neoliberalism, and you had within the Catholic Church individuals, starting with but not limited to the Secretary of the Treasury, William Simon, who were neoliberals and were very much pro-militarism, which veered from the bishops of the time. And among these folks was a man called Paul Weyrich, who was he was an extremist. He was an extremist in terms of his conservatism. In fact, the Catholic Church of the Vatican II, for him, was no longer Catholic. And he was a Christian nationalist, felt that the founding fathers, despite the fact that they didn't think that all men were created equal, maybe all men, but that all people were created equal, had the right idea. And he felt that Catholics could not do it alone. His big issue was abortion. And of course, in the 70s, abortion became recognized as a constitutional right. He went to Jerry Falwell, who was a very important Christian broadcaster. And at that time, the white Christian evangelicals were doing all they could, pulling out all the stops to fight integration, especially in the schools, by organizing their own schools, private academies, so that they wouldn't have to abide by Brown versus the Board of Education, the great Supreme Court decision, which said separate is not equal. Weyrich went to Jerry Falwell and said two things. He said, you know, this can't be done either by evangelicals alone or Catholics alone, but we have to return to the policies of our founding fathers. We need a moral majority in this country. Together, we can be the moral majority. So it was a Catholic who coined that term. And the other thing he said to Jerry Falwell is that segregation is not an attractive flagship issue for this moral majority. And so it became abortion. And from that time, not that the bishops were not against abortion before, but from that time, slowly, and I show all of the different organizations that contributed to this from that time, including EWTN, which is the broadcasting network that Jean mentioned. From that time, the bishops hooked their ship. It's kind of a lousy metaphor. They hooked whatever it is. That was their flag, and that was to the diminishment of other pro-life issues.
Thank you. Another area of pro-life, I'm going to make the bridge there. I believe in the text you were talking about, when you talked about Black Catholicism and some of the bishops in terms of saying that Black Lives Matter is anti-Christian. Is that's correct? Yeah. I'm going to ask you, why? Well,
Even as Pope Francis told anyone who'd listen, but he told several different groups that these solidarity movements were like the Good Samaritan, and this was specifically after the murder of George Floyd. He said those who were protesting this kind of who were protesting were like the Good Samaritan. They didn't walk by. They stayed and they witnessed. He said, that's what, these people, that's what you, because he was talking to a group of activists, this is what you are like. Instead, other groups, other bishops, including Jose Gomez of Los Angeles, said that these solidarity movements were pseudo religions, that they were actually undermining Christianity. It's a logic that begs more explanation, which I can't give, but that is the policy. It's also a kind of old-fashioned Christian nationalist anti-elitism, because he posits that a group like Black Lives Matter has its origins on campuses. The worst thing you can be, an educated elite. Plus, it's a big lie. If you read about, it is a book I highly recommend by Black Catholic theologian Olga Segura, about the origins of Black Lives Matter. And it totally gives the lie to this idea that such solidarity movements are anti-Christian. In fact, some of the founders talk about the same themes that liberation theologians, Catholic liberation, well, not just Catholic, but liberation theologians speak of, about the option for the poor. So we have to be very careful to discern or to try to make our own discernments, because not everything that comes from the mouth of a bishop is true. I mean, some things just aren't true. Just like with politicians, you respect authority, but boy, do you do your own work when you're listening to these figures in authority.
thank you. Yeah. Sometimes I think as women, particularly, Catholic, we want to make everything feel good, right? We want to heal, we do want to heal things, bring justice, etc. But Sometimes we don't like to cause trouble. And yet I think a work of a journalist is about truth telling. And Susan Grant introduced me to the book by Maria Ressa, who's a Filipina journalist. And it's called How to Stand Up to a Dictator. And I was reading this a couple of months ago, and she has a quote about a journalist. And I feel like it helps me understand Mary Jo's work and her work in the world. A good journalist doesn't look for balance, because that would create a false equivalence. Good journalists lean on the side of evidence. That's what I think this book offers. It offers evidence not on one topic, but offers evidence on 9 different topics and threads them together throughout history. So a good journalist lean on the side of evidence, on incontrovertible facts. It means having the courage to report the evidence, even if it gets you in trouble with the powers that be. I also thought of the story, the Hans Christian Andersen, where the child yells out, "The emperor has no clothes." And I kind of felt like when I was reading this book, that's what I began to see. And I felt a lot of loss myself, felt a lot of loss. I felt sadness. And I also felt like, wow, what can be done kind of thing. It's like, this is a crisis we're living in, a dark moment in history. And where is our creativity? That's our job. That's not Mary Jo's job. That's our job. But I do want to ask you, this is kind of like one of our last questions, is because we're working with time, any eternity in time here. What do you want people, particularly this group of people, Catholic women, to know after reading this book?
Well, to know that the information is out there and that this is in your hands. You know, it goes back to see, judge, act. Read, learn, make your decisions, and act on them. Dare I say, pray, but also, you know, we're not going to be able to change anything unless we do it ourselves. And it doesn't have to be in a big way. It can be in our own backyard. It has to be in our own backyard mostly. Yeah, I would say inform ourselves, make the judgments, and understand the obligation to act. Well, what would it be for you? We're moving into questions here.
Yeah, I don't have the answer, but that's, what I've been thinking about. What do? We have white hair, some of us, and some of us have hidden white hair. and what are things we can do? I feel that is informing ourselves. That's number one. But I'm in doubt. What do I have the energy to do? I'm old. I don't drive at night. This sort of thing. So what can I do that I am capable of doing well? And that's a big question.
We all know how to write. We can write a letter. This is just like one suggestion out of millions. Write a letter to our local parish priest or even to our local bishop and ask where our money is being invested. Is it being invested in fossil fuel companies, even though the Vatican says do not do that? even though Laudato Si, the great encyclical about our common home by Pope Francis, it says don't do that. This is a tiny but important thing. And you could even quote the Pope. You could quote the Vatican. And you could maybe even get an answer. What is my parish or my country doing? My country, that would be nice. My parish doing to follow Laudato Si? Look, you're all here. This is already one thing that you're doing. You're informing yourselves in a way that's extraordinary, given that there aren't 1,000 people in this room. So you're already a vanguard. You just need to find, and it's not as if you need to find, but everyone has a place that she can make a difference, or ask a question. Just ask a question.
We are going to have small group conversations and larger Q&A later. I'm going to turn it to Ellen. I just want to thank Mary Jo first for her conversation. And spotlight goes to Ellen now.
I'll echo that. Thanks. This has been tremendous, and I want to thank all of you for your wonderful concentration and the quiet and the questions. Obviously, this is bringing up feelings and questions in your own mind. So, but before we jump into our small groups and our large group, it's time for our break. So we have a 15-minute break until 10:45. As a reminder, again, one restroom is down to the right, around the corner. The other is down the stairs. At the bottom of the stairs, make kind of a hard right. Go down to the end of the hall, and hopefully the lights are on. I haven't. And then make a right again, and you will find back in the chasms restroom number 2. Yes, we have books for sale during the break. Please find your favorite beverage, and we'll meet you back at 10:45. Thank you. Oh, and please sign. We have a sign up for the Google list if you're new, the attendance sheet, and then lastly, service. Thank you.
Still going to communion in my own archdiocese. So I haven't suffered what Nancy Pelosi did. Aggrandizing, of course. No. I've had clerics write to me and say it's about time. And I've had one cleric, I call him a super cleric because of his position in his order, who told me that he had been, in his writings, had been given access to the material of a very well-known bishop who has now passed away. And that bishop told him, follow the money in his writing. So, yeah, I get, there are things on social media which aren't too pretty to read. Am I doing that? No. Okay. But no, I haven't. No, not yet. Of course, I'm sorry. Of course, that big review in NCR just came out yesterday. So we'll see what effects that has.
Questions? Anybody?
Hi, Jane Claire.
Oh, hello. In your talk to this morning, you mentioned that, you haven't lost your faith, which is wonderful. Could you give us any signs of hope that you've been experiencing while you're writing this book? you know, a lot of the information is hard to swallow in a sense, but very important to know. But at the same time, what signs of hope have you been seeing?
Well, I look around this room and I look at you folks up there,
Yes.
and this is a sign of hope.
Gotta be
because-
more than that.
A reaching out, I mean, if you're Saturday morning, for Pete's sake, and to become more informed about your own faith. I think the synodality process is on which the U.S. bishops have, as a group, dragged their collective feet. But I think that it's a genie that can't be put back in the bottle. I followed the Amazon synod very closely and saw that the manner in which that was prepared for and the amount of grassroots shaping of the agenda that took place. And I even was in the Amazon during the synod because I was reporting for NCR at the time, and we thought, you know, they had all these people in Rome. I said, you know, how about somebody in the Amazon? And I got a taste of how it was such a collaborative effort and listening to absolutely everybody. So if that synodality process has been followed as much in other countries and in places in this country as it was previous to the Amazon Synod, I think that process is a point of hope. I think we have young people who are interested, who are questioning, who feel as I do that their faith is the center of things, that they're not going to walk away from it because they don't understand this or that, or that they've had a bad experience with this person or that person. And I meet them all the time. And you asked, I don't know where to look to see you. Here, I'm going to look up at the screen. Okay. And you write to read so many wonderful Catholic writers and theologians that are out there. That gave me a great deal of hope. And you said during the writing, but I think subsequent to the writing, you know, when I finished this book, I just wanted to walk away from it. I didn't want to do any promotion, sorry, or anything, because it was so toxic. The material was so toxic. Unlike my other books, which I just so enjoyed writing. I mean, you don't enjoy every minute, you know, you're in archives, you're in libraries, you're going, oh my God, you know, not another 50-mile trip to meet somebody. But then when you get there, you really enjoy hearing the voices of the people that you write about. And this book, I had this, you know, a Catholic girl, I have a free-floating guilt feeling that I can plug into at any given moment. And I kept saying to myself, you know, this is just not right. This is just not right. I shouldn't be writing about this. And so I think I was my own worst enemy, because when it finished, I was not on board with doing promotion. Of course, my publisher had other ideas, and I realized the feedback that I was getting from, you know, I was worried about people that I was in first, second, third grade with. How are they going to react to it? People I'm still in touch with. I'm absolutely serious about this. And they were writing to me and saying, I'm so glad you did this. I'm so glad somebody finally did this. And so to me, that is a point of hope. Does that answer the question?
Yes, very much. Thank you.
Uh-huh. I'm sorry.
Sadiqa has her hand up.
Oh, yes, go ahead, Vita.
Unmute yourself, dear.
Unmute, please.
Thank you, Mary Jo, for your work. I'm just wondering, was there anything, I'm a former reporter myself. Was there anything that you just felt you could not make public? That you struggled with because you thought it needed to be and yet you couldn't?
If I did, I wouldn't be doing it now.
No, I'm just curious. Yes or no answer.
Yes,
Okay.
only because I did not have enough time. Given the fact that this is what's called a topical book, it's about right now. I just pulled out that New York Times piece that said the next election is going to be about Christian nationalism. If you remember the last election,
Oh, boy.
as bishops, look at Archbishop Dolan, they were on the side of President Trump. Because this was a time element, I did not have time to run down things I heard.
All right.
That if I'd had another year or two, I would have run them down. But there is nothing that would have changed the essence of what's in each of these chapters. If anything, it would have made them worse. You know, it would have been even more critical. It was like more examples, you see.
But
Yeah.
the basic thrust of what needed to be said, the subject matter you gave us, you've given us.
Sorry, say it again.
You've covered the subjects that needed to be covered.
I felt that I did. They were the subjects I felt needed to be covered. They were the ones that were the most obvious. And what was important to me as a journalist, which is, you're always thinking about history. Where did this come from? How did this happen? I thought it was really important to put in the history of some of these issues. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. The only other question I have is, why do you think there's so many priests who speak to us privately? Why do you think priests are unable to gather together and make a difference?
Maybe I missed something, but I never heard that the Catholic Church was a democracy. And
No.
I don't mean to be glib,
Yeah.
but it's the same reason that I had that angst when I finished the book. I'm a cradle Catholic. I mean, I started before I had a choice. You know, I have such respect for authority. And as a priest, I guess you would translate that to hierarchy. That I think this question is best asked of a priest. But, this is dedicated to Father Bill.
Yeah. Father Bill was
Right.
unique.
Who in his lifetime was arrested 258 times for nonviolent
Yeah.
resistance, as he used to say, when my country misbehaves, when my government misbehaves. And there, you got Louis Vitale over in my neck of the woods. You have, you've got, I was just in Baja California with Margarita Melville. She and Tom Melville, former Mary Knowles, were, part of the Catonsville Nine. It's not as if clergy do not the Berrigans do not. But why they don't get together,
That was my question, really.
I think has to do with the nature of the company they work for.
Fair enough. Thank you.
I think. I don't know. Anybody else got a different answer? Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, and the answer's too. I know you mean that. Okay.
Thank you, Mary Jo, for your lecture. I learned a lot from it. And my question is, given the current political climate and the recent announcement of the diocese filing for Chapter 11, I just wanted to ask how you tap into your faith to keep the fight going. What are your inner resources that you tap into to keep that Catholicism and that cradle Catholic girl going? Thank you.
It sounds like it might be a final question. That's good. No, I know.
I can't even imagine how to start to answer that. I guess the way I was raised, my parents were very pious. The Catholic nuns inculcated in me the idea of questioning and the idea of strength. I mean, they were the strongest people I knew. How do I don't know, praying. Oh, I know. I think it's having the luck to be, to having met so many people in my work who, are in extremely difficult situations. You know, war, extreme poverty, and to see how they, I wouldn't say cling to their faith, I would say, you know, act the faith. And so, I mean, it's really the example of others, is so that, I mean, it's like people like me have no right in a certain way to be, to doubt when people who are going through such extreme circumstances not only don't doubt, but carry the faith forward in their everyday lives.
In a room full of women. Oh, maybe I said, in a room full of women, and at my church, there have been many women who've delivered homilies. What is your thinking about women becoming priests? Is that going to happen within the brief lifetime I have left?
$228 now, I think, women priests who were ordained going back. I have a whole chapter on women, Catholic girls. I hope it will happen. I believe it. I'm not sure it'll happen. But I hope I'm not telling tales out of school. Well, my poor daughter, she had the fate to be born of a journalist. So I'm going to tell you a story. That she wanted to have a Catholic wedding. She got married in February. She wanted, can I tell this? Okay. Okay. I'm asking Jean, can I tell this? And she wanted to have a Catholic wedding. And I said, whoa, that's great, because I just thought that was great. And she said, but I don't want a man priest. And oh my God, what have I done? You know? And she said, has Jean ever performed a wedding? And I said, I don't know, but you can ask, and the rest is history. Because Jean was the celebrant at our daughter's wedding. 120 people in Antigua, Guatemala. Things are changing. If they're not changing fast enough for those of us who are of a certain age, they're changing with young people who have this same idea. I want a Catholic this, I want a Catholic that. And you know, right now she's the reason that I have to kind of run out of here is because she's the godmother at a baptism down the peninsula. So I think that as women take more control of their own lives, they'll take more control of their faith lives. And I think it has to come around. I think it has to come around. And of course, women preaching, I know that's one of the reasons I used to tune in during the COVID to your parish. I mean, it was wonderful. And I know women were preaching here at one time. So there's a whole history of that in the book too.
I wish we had more time because I know that there's a lot of interest. It's been such a rich morning, Mary Jo. I want to thank you, and our group wants to thank you so, so much, not only for being here this morning, but for the tremendous, I think, groundbreaking work that you do to open our eyes and to open our eyes to the world. Before we get into announcements, Peg, would you lead us in our closing prayer this morning? And I just have a brief request that you keep Betty Wharton in your prayers, because Betty was going to be giving you the closing prayer and Peg gratefully stepped in. She has a rebounding COVID. Is now cancer free though. I have to tell you that so there are wonderful miracles happening, but poor Betty's not here. So
my understanding is that, is it Mary Claire? Jane Claire came up with these prayers, and I'm choosing this one of the three. Almighty and eternal God, the Father in the parable of the prodigal son, clearly manifests your dispositions toward us. Thus, you forgave the prodigal son for his frantic pursuit of pleasure, for squandering the rich inheritance you had given him. You forgave the elder son for his self-righteous condemnation, both of his younger brother and of your tender forgiveness of his outrageous behavior. You insisted only that they live together in peace. May we know your infinite mercy and share it with one another, both as individuals and as nations, races, religions, ethnic groups, neighbors, households, and families. Grant us ever deepening commitment to the rights and needs of every member of the human family, and an ever increasing respect and love for the integrity and interdependence of all creation.
thank you, Peg. Okay, so I'd like to remind everyone that book sales will continue in the back with Mrs. Dalloway's after our meeting. And Elaine Keeter is on Zoom, and there she is. And would you like to let everyone know about our Google list?
Well, all the announcements you've seen from Peg were facilitated by the Women in Conversation group list. And if you're not on it and not getting these emails, then please sign the sheet at the back of the room if you're there, or put your name and email address in the chat so that I can add you to the list. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Elaine. And I'd like to thank everyone who's been involved in service this year, as well as this morning. I'll begin with Karen Mattern, who was online and has consistently she provides not only our Zoom link, but she's our Zoom host, she's our Zoom coordinator. So we wouldn't be here without Karen. Susan Schaefer, who was our tech coordinator and Zoom coordinator here. Again, we would not be having the digital, the sound, any of that. You can see all the wires. This is not an easy setup. And Father Ivan, who provided us with some of the equipment and setup before he left town, especially. Andrea Sessa, who does our poster and flyer designs, and she is now doing tech backup. So multi-handed. Concha Delgado, who came up with was really the heart and soul of our logo design with her husband this year. So we have a logo. Yoo-hoo! Elaine Keeter, who is our Google group coordinator and whom you just met. Thank you, Elaine. Gail Hillebrand. Maybe Gail, you can stand up. I don't know if everyone knows you. So Gail has been our treasurer the past 2 years, and she does a tremendous job of not only keeping track of our funds, which have been in 2 locations, both within Newman Hall. We've transitioned, I think, very nicely to having a Newman Hall account, but also just to forecast, because getting the balances is a slow process. So she's done a tremendous job, and she is stepping down this year. So I want to mention that is an open position. And then our mass announcements. Yes, and not to diminish the clapping there. We have mass announcements here at Newman. And I'd like to thank Susan Grant, Deb Tatto, Susan Schaefer, and Kathleen O'Brien for your assistances this year. Our hospitality team has had flexibility with it. And so there's a group, a large expanding group, and that includes Maria. I call her Maria O, if you all know who, because I don't want to butcher her last name. Odezinski, something like that, who is in Italy today. Susan Grant, Deb Tatto, Cheryl McGuire, who I don't know if she's online or not, and Peg Bogle, all of you for helping out with hospitality. And then we have our prayer resources. So for the opening and closing prayers, this year it's been Jane Claire Ishiguro, Betty Wharton. I want to include her because her heart and soul was in it for this morning. Linda Rutkowski, I don't see her today, but Linda, Andrea Sessa, and Therese Stawowi. All of you, thank you. And then we have some planning, we have vision, we have spiritual resources. And Therese, over the years, has been a tremendous resource for both vision and spiritual resources. I'd like a special thank you to Therese. And then lastly to Jean, our Jean. There's a lot that goes on behind. Well, hold on. Let me mention Jean. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes in our planning and so on. There's the theme. There's vision. There is just spiritual resources and kind of knowing where we're going, navigating, discerning. And then there's a backboard, right, with ideas and circumstances. And then there's just the, doing the work, right? And Jean is just always there, willing to do whatever. So, Jean, we wouldn't have this without you. Okay. And so now I'd like to mention volunteers. Okay. So we need to expand, I think, both the service. I'm a real believer on rotation of leadership. I think it's essential for the health of any organization. So we have a need for someone to help with publicity. And it's actually a pretty simple job. It's a matter of giving flyers to some of the neighboring parishes, of taking a file for a poster and taking it down and getting it printed, bringing it over to Newman, sending some email reminders when we get close to the event. So it's not complicated, and we really need someone to take on PR. We need someone who would be an event and a team leader. So, i.e., my job. So, and we've had in the past co-chairs, which I highly recommend. I think it takes the load off of any one individual. And the scope of that work is you lead events, you help organize the team, and you help with the team planning. You're more of a facilitator than anything else. And then things pop up and you just make sure that they happen. But again, I really encourage a duo, and I also want you to know that you would be mentored. All of these positions include mentoring. Okay, no one is out there alone for the first time. Treasurer, and Gail, if I miss anything here, please let me fill in. For the treasurer, this person would manage the Women in Conversation funds. You would make donation appeals. You would give an update on the balance sheet, maybe whatever, every quarterly. And you send out the speaker stipends. Am I missing anything? Yeah. And you get the financials from an excellent account gal we have with Newman right now, Anna. So that's the treasurer. We have a student dinner coordinator, and this might even expand to just student coordinator. But I really felt like we didn't hit the ball out of the park with that one at all this year, because we didn't have enough warm bodies making meals. And it's not from a lack of recipes, because Father Ryan said he has lots of recipes to provide. So we need at least 6 people, but I think most importantly is a coordinator. Just somebody to say, okay, yep, I'll talk to people, I'll make the announcements, I'll just pull people together. And if need be, ask a few new people. And then planning team. So we get together mostly in the summer, but then periodically, sometimes during the year, and we plan our events. We discern the annual theme. If you have a real interest to be on our planning team, step up. I mean, I just think whatever is your calling, it's really important to tune into what that is and what, really makes your soul fly, right? With our organization. So that's it for service. There is a sign-up sheet in the back, or please talk to any of us on the team. Let us know what you're interested in. Jean? Oh, I do also want to mention, relative to cleanup, we could use some extra hands with cleanup today. So if anyone has the time to stick around at the end, that would be terrific.
Yes. We are going to have announcements after this. I just have.
We had a question here that said, what's your call to action? And Ellen just gave us lots of opportunities to be women in action in this community. So that's what I just wanted to add.
Perfect cake. Before I say anything else, I think we really need to honor and recognize Ellen's work. She is a phenomenal organizer. Meticulous and faithful and discerning in every way. We have a 3-page single space schedule just for this morning, and it's been revised twice. So, but she's just really, really wonderful. So thank you, Ellen, for all your love and care and leadership in every way. So before I get to my question, I think it's interesting. Ellen said to me, there's some men in the parish that want to come to this meeting. And then didn't someone ask if he could come in camouflage? So we wonder what that person would look like. Anyway, in the NCR, they said the Sisters of Charity had made a decision. They are no longer taking women into the community. And you've probably read one after the other Catholic colleges are closing. Most of these were started by women, holy names. Some of us know Cardinal Stewart in Milwaukee. It's just a lot of colleges are closing. Religious women, that form of religious life is not what it used to be. And there's a little squeak in the Vatican that lay women can now participate as voters. And there's a little more squeak about laity and how important. I think this is our charge. I think it's our charge. I think it's what we need to do. And that leads me into an opportunity that would any of you be interested in being in a study group of playing God? And the group, we could decide how to meet, when to meet, kind of questions, if we want to do it online or in person. And it's interesting because Melissa was telling me this morning as a parish she connects with, St. Cecilia's in Boston. She said, guess what? They're starting a new book, Playing God. So anyway, if people are would anyone be interested in doing a study group with this? Okay. Yeah, we need to get their names too. Yeah. Okay. Meet me in the back after and I'll get your names. That'd be great. And we'll talk about how we might do that. I said we. Sounds like I'm in the group. I don't know. Okay. Anyway, and are there any other announcements that you would personally like to make? Looks like Deb's here, and I bet it's about food.
Two things. If you added your name to the list earlier and did not put an email, be sure that you do that. The second is a vignette of when we mentioned Father Ivan provided the equipment years ago when this group first started. Father Bernie was the pastor, and he said something to Jean about, oh, Jean, I'm so sorry I can't make it to the meeting. And she said, Bernie, you're not invited. Anyway, this is my regular announcement. Please, if you brought any food, please take it home. Don't leave it. Don't think someone else will take it. If you don't want to take it home, just toss it, because this building is only open 3 hours a day during the summer. And so nobody, if you leave it here, nobody's going to eat it or use it. So please take it or put it in the compost. Thanks.
Okay, another thank you.
I want to give you, I'd call it the annual treasurer's thank you, but I think I forgot to do it last year. You have supported this ministry. You supported by showing up. You supported it by opening your minds to our speakers. You supported it by opening your hearts to each other in our conversations. And many of you supported it by opening your wallets to our calls for funding our small budget. As we look for a new treasurer, it really is an easy job now because people, we don't spend a lot of money, and the Newman system is actually all sorted out now. I could not have told you a year ago it was an easy job, but I can tell you now it's quite an easy job. I'm stepping down because I have some other family commitments for the next year. But if anybody has an inkling that might be interested in doing that job, I'd be quite happy to tell you how I've done it, how you could do it better than I've done it, and to be there for you. I will not be going anywhere. So thank you, each of you. It's been a pleasure to work with you and for you.
Thank you. So if you want to be in the study group, there are a few books left over there. You need to make a run to the table and get them. I want to thank Jessica for coming. That's right, Jessica, right? When I talked to Eric on the phone and asked if Miss Dalloway's would be willing to come, because Mary and Carla also, weren't able to make it. Eric was so generous, and we're really happy to work with you. And Ellen did mention through Mary Jo that he would not be invited. We needed women, but so thank you for coming. And once again, looks like I have a question before the last thank you. Yes, you may share an announcement.
Thank you. So again, my name is Emily, and this announcement was authorized with Ellen's permission. Thank you. I still do the monthly prayer for peace. It's a rosary for Ukraine. I schedule it on the Friday closest to the 24th of each month, because that's the anniversary date of when Russia invaded Ukraine. This will be at St. Mary Magdalene And it happens to be next Friday, May 26th, and it's at 3 p.m. I know it's not exactly the most convenient schedule, but I picked the Friday at 3 p.m. because it's the Lord's hour. The sorrowful mysteries of the Rosary will be recited. And in honor of the diversity in our community, I welcome anybody who would like to lead a decade in her mother tongue to participate. And so I've had rosaries recited in Italian, in Spanish, in Filipino, which I speak fluently. Thank you. May 26th at 3 p.m. at St. Mary Magdalene. Thank you, Ellen. Thank you, June.
Thank you. So once again, a special thank you to Mary Jo, and I know she'll be a freeway flyer in a moment. And, you know, could we extend our hand in blessing over her? This just happened to me right now. Yeah. We ask that the Creator Spirit, who is wise, moves us to be courageous, to use the gifts that we have to do the work that we have to do. May she be protected. May she continue to walk stridently and strong with a bold voice. She has found her voice. And may her words generate life in unseen multiple ways and bring the church to a loving, inclusive community and beloved community. Mary Jo, you are beloved by us. Amen.